Hi everyone, and welcome back to the series of video tutorials that I wanted to do around Improve OSM, our project to expose a lot of the data that we get through GPS and point set mistakes, potential mistakes in OpenStreetMap data or stuff that's just not there yet. And in this video I'd like to focus on kind of the process of using the web tool to edit some of the things that we see in Improve OSM. And to start, I would like to look at a one-way error that we notice a lot of in Improve OSM. How that works basically is we get GPS traces and we combine those into trips from the people that use Scout, and these trips have obviously a direction, and if we see a lot of trips going in just one direction, and the probability is pretty high that this is a one-way street. And we then compare that with current OSM data and look at the one-way tag specifically and a few other tags as well, to see if what we see corresponds with what is in OSM data. And quite often that is not the case, and that's when you would see one of these things, these guys here on improveosm.org. So let's look at the editing process. So you can see that there's actually a number of errors here that we see that are most of them are really the same road. We cut all the roads up into segments that span one intersection to the next. So this may be just one OSM way, but in our data it's actually a couple of different segments. So it doesn't really matter which one we click here, but let's just use the first one. We can see that the data for each of these is fairly similar. We have about 5,500 trips through each of these segments, and the vast majority of those trips go in just one direction. So how about we edit this in OSM, or at least look at it in OSM and see if it needs to be edited. So we use either of these buttons here in the information panel, either edit on osm.org or edit in JOSM. So what osm.org does is it takes you to osm.org, obviously, and it will look at what editor you set in the osm.org preferences in your personal user preferences, and will launch that editor, which could very well be JOSM as well, but at least we want to give you the option of setting your personal preference and using that. So that's why this button is here. This button will take you directly to JOSM if you have it running. If you don't, you'll get a dialog like this one here, because I don't currently have JOSM running. So right now we'll use osm.org to fire up an editing environment. What you'll see happen is it will open a new tab in your browser, or a new window if you don't have tabs, which will kind of be zoomed into the same area. And you have to kind of remember which street it was that we were looking at. So we look at 4th Avenue South in this case, which turns out to be this road here. And then it's not quite obvious immediately whether this is actually a one-way road or not. You would usually be able to see this from the aerial imagery. First you need to zoom in a little bit. But even then, sometimes the streets themselves can get in the way of actually seeing what's going on. So what I like to do is go to the map data dialog here, and kind of temporarily turn off the road features so I can actually inspect what's going on there. So let's zoom in a little bit more. Usually the clues are close to intersections. So here you see really one car that you can obviously see that it is driving in the southeastern direction, and the other arrows also point in that direction. So it's pretty clear that this is a one-way street. So before we start actually editing, we look at some of the other intersections here, and we see that the same thing is going on. So all the markings on the road point to this being a one-way street, having 3 lanes with one travel direction. So even if we go further up, we see the same thing here as well. And then even up to here, you see the same thing. So it's not always clear whether we can validate the one-wayness, if you will, of a road with using satellite or aerial imagery. If you're not sure, just skip it and either close it as Or actually rather just leave it alone. Maybe someone else will have local knowledge and be able to solve it. So just if you're not quite sure, just leave it alone. For now, with this one, I'm confident that this is actually a one-way street. There's really no doubt in my mind that this is a one-way street, at least from starting from not quite here, but at least starting from here. You can see multiple travel lanes here because there's cars pointing in a different direction here. So here it's a little less obvious. There's a stop line here as well. So this is a two-way segment. But all the way from here down from here, it looks like it's a one-way segment, and I'm confident about that. So I'm going to turn this back on, so we can see all the roads and actually edit them. So we start here and mark this. We can see from the arrow here that it's that the street is already pointing in the right direction in OSM. So we only have to click the one-way checkbox in the ID dialog to make it a one-way, and make that an actual edit in OSM. So before we save that, we have to be very careful though to see that our one-way street doesn't extend too far south. In this case, so this is a different way, so we don't have to worry about that. But we have to be very careful not to mark too long a stretch of way one way unless we've actually verified that this whole thing is a one-way street. So after carefully inspecting that, and also the other terminus of this OSM way, I'm going to go all the way up here. So you can see here that here's where the two-way part of this street starts. So we have to make sure that this way is actually split here. If you do need to split it, there you can just click on the node, and there would be an icon. This scissor icon would be active, where you can split the way in two parts and treat them as separate entities in OSM. In this case, we didn't have to do that. So we're now ready to save this, and we're going to do so in the ID editor. Got to do a quick comment. I'm going to give a shout out to Improve OSM. I'm using a hashtag for it. I don't know. That's not really necessary. It's nothing in particular that we're doing with that information just yet, but making 4th Avenue one way. And then we'll save this. Okay. So once that's done, we go back to Improve OSM. Now we're going to let everyone know that this is actually done. So currently it's not possible to select more than one segment at a time, unfortunately. So we'll have to kind of do those things separately. We'll probably change that in the future. If you use the JOSM plugin, which I'll talk about in a later future video, you'll be able to select more than one error at a time and change their status. So, but as it is in the web tool, we have to kind of do this separately. So I'm going to edit the status of this to set it to solved. Do the same thing here, and then go down the section of nodes. We didn't quite do this little segment here. We forgot about that. So let's just leave it at this. And if you don't immediately see, you have to kind of zoom out and zoom back in to see that these now disappear. That's also kind of a small bug that we still have. But once you zoom out and zoom back in, you'll see that that this is now disappearing from the map. It will also disappear from the heat map if you zoom further out. However, if you click solved, then you'll see that these are now show up, obviously, because we marked them as solved if we filter by that status. So that's basically a quick walkthrough of editing in Improve OSM with one-way streets as an example. In a future video, I'll go into the other types here as well, because they're all a little different in the way you edit them, and I'll also go into what to do if you find some an error that turns out not to be an error, which will happen. I mean, it's GPS data, and as such, there might be yeah, there might be things that are already fixed, or just not as we think they are, if you will. So I hope you'll join me for in the future videos where I complete the walkthrough of Improve OSM. Thanks.